Welcome to episode 31 of Under Your Spell, a Willow and Tara fanfiction podcast. Thank you for listening. Today I will be reading some more of the story Cause and Manner, written by Just Jane 18. If you're enjoying the story so far, please let the author know. I have her contact information in the show notes. And if you have been enjoying the podcast, please leave a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher, or you can email any feedback to me at underyourspellpodcast@yahoo.com. You can also let me know what you think via the listener survey, which a link to that is also in the show notes. Cause and Manner, Chapter 6, A Vampire and Verisimilitude. Tara was floating in the deliriously happy memories of her kisses with Willow as she sat on the train headed back to her apartment in Berkeley. She had been single for several years, since a bad breakup with the woman she had dated throughout most of college, and for 2 years after graduation, her only serious relationship. She had thought the feelings Katie and she had for each other at the outset would grow and develop, but Katie had changed over time. She became very demanding and focused on making money, and thought Tara was wasting her time working for the non-profit farm workers organization. Eventually, Katie had announced she could no longer stay with someone with no financial stability in her future and left. That had given Tara the opportunity and excuse to spend even more time working and volunteering while avoiding the issue of dating. She was just too inherently shy to go out and meet people, and most of her friends were in couples. Then Willow had literally stepped into her life and asked her out not once, but twice. She couldn't imagine where she had found the courage to kiss the beautiful redhead tonight. Maybe the residual light magic in the room had affected both of the witches in the best possible way. There was no question she was falling for Willow, and it seemed that the feelings might be reciprocated. Tara exited the station and started the 4-block walk to her apartment, feeling giddy at the prospect of Willow being attracted to her. She found everything about Willow sexy, especially her sparkling green eyes. But she had rarely felt attractive to someone else, and never in the way that Willow made her feel. She was halfway home when she heard a sound behind her, and thought she should stop skipping, as it might make her look a little silly. A smile was still on her face, but she settled into a stride. When noises came from a line of bushes next to an office building on her left, the smile faded and her pace quickened. A left turn at the corner, and she could see the driveway that led to her over the garage apartment a block away. When the rustling in the vegetation became louder, she quickly scanned her spell memories for something that could help. Willow's face popped into her mind, and she thought about the spell on the backpacks to protect them and make them less noticeable. Would a similar glamour work on her? She quickly altered and incanted the phrases and finished just as a man emerged from behind the line of bushes. He was dressed darkly and clearly looking for her, and seemed confused at her sudden disappearance. She broke into a run for the last block and raced up the stairs to her front door. She fished her keyring from the bottom of her bag and shakily got the door key into the lock when a sudden thump sounded above her. Was that something on her roof? Stepping in, she turned to shut the door, and found the man who had followed her had just jumped down onto the landing and was headed for the door. She slammed the door shut just as she reached the opening, and her last vision had been of his face, disfigured. Although she had never seen one up close, the bright moonlight had glinted on the long fangs of the stalking vampire. Knowing the vampire couldn't get in without an invitation, and certainly not past the protection spell she had placed on her home, was comforting in a way, but not enough to overcome the terror running through her veins at the thought of a vampire tracking her into her own neighborhood. She had never heard of vampire attacks in the quiet residential area of Berkeley, but anything was possible. She could call Willow and ask her about it tomorrow. For now she would remember to be more aware of her surroundings and take a cab if it was late at night to avoid another random encounter. She spent several minutes checking the windows and boosting her protection spells to full power before falling into a fitful sleep. Monday mornings were always busy with cases that the medical examiners on call for the weekend didn't have time to complete, and Dr. Rosenberg found herself finishing her second autopsy before 10 a.m. on this Monday. By the time she was finished dictating her reports, it was almost lunchtime. While some Sunday leftovers were heating in the microwave, she checked her email for the first time that day. Most of the messages were regarding court appearances and depositions on autopsies she had performed, asking for her schedule. After responding to all the clerks and attorneys, she realized she didn't have an email or phone message from Nick Anderson about the Duncan Green case from Friday. She called him, and once again the phone rang to his voicemail. She decided to head over to his office and see if she could track him down. Willow was surprised when she walked into the large open room with multiple divided modular spaces that housed the investigators to find Nick sitting at his desk. "Nick, I just called you. I wanted to see what you found out about Duncan Green on Friday." "Hi, Dr. Rosenberg." Nick remained focused on his computer screen. "I must have been on the phone." Willow waited for a minute. "So, what did you find out about Mr. Green?" Now she could tell that Nick was nervous. He started fiddling with some papers in front of him, still not making eye contact. "I didn't get a chance to go back out to his condo. Sorry. I got called away to another death scene and never made it." Willow didn't know what to say, but she was sure her expression showed the shock she was feeling. Nick was one of the best investigators in the office, and it was completely out of character for him to ignore a direct assignment from one of the doctors. She also felt a little wounded. She had asked him personally, and he had seemed to agree that the investigation was important. "Nick, why didn't you get someone else to cover? Or send someone else back to the condo if you had to?" "I don't know what to say, you just blew me off." That at least got him to look at her, and he looked dutifully embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Doc." Now Willow realized Nick was glancing around her, almost furtively, to the private back office of the lead investigator, who was technically his direct supervisor. Christina Grubber was a woman Willow loathed. She took the title of lead to equal supervisor who does no real work, and seemed to spend most of her day complaining about the office and fixing her makeup. When Nick looked back at her, he whispered, "I was ordered to another scene and told to drop the follow-up on Duncan Green." Following another peek at the back office, he leaned closer to Willow before speaking. "I feel bad about this, but I can't lose this job. I have to follow orders." "Mine don't count? I know I asked politely, but it was still a request from a medical examiner, Nick." "Do I need to go talk to Grubber?" Willow countered. Nick was still looking behind Willow as she spoke, but suddenly turned back towards his computer. "It wasn't just Grubber, Dr. Rosenberg. Take a look for yourself." Willow turned and was about to storm over to Grubber's office and give the woman a piece of her mind when she saw that the lead investigator was not alone in her office. Someone was sitting in one of her guest chairs, someone with a balding head with residual brown hair she would recognize anywhere. James Pierce. This was problematic. James had tried to take the Duncan Green case from her, and now he had interfered in the investigation, but that had nothing to do with Nick, and she didn't want him to feel bad for protecting his job. "I think I understand what happened. Thanks for the info. I'll keep you out of it, okay?" Nick half turned to her with a look of relief. "Thank you. You are a good medical examiner and a good person. Take some friendly advice and watch out for those two." Willow hadn't been back in her office for 2 minutes before Elise popped her head in the door. "Boss is looking for you. He wants to see you in his office. Everything all right?" "I honestly don't know. Let me go see what Dr. Banks wants." Willow wondered if this day could get any stranger. When she arrived at the office of the chief medical examiner, she found her boss with his chair turned toward the window, looking out at the traffic speeding by on the freeway. "You wanted to see me, Dr. Banks?" He turned towards her, but the expression on the older man's face remained somewhat glazed. "Willow, I need to talk to you about one of your cases, a Duncan Green." Willow immediately stiffened. What the heck was going on? What would you like to know? "I got a call today from an attorney at PAI about a large employee life insurance policy on Mr. Green." "Oh, so the company doesn't want to pay?" Willow retorted almost smugly. Dr. Banks ran his hand through his dark hair. "No, strangely, it is the opposite. They are anxious to pay Mrs. Green the money, and they have offered to buy the condo the Greens were living in, so that Mrs. Green can take the children back to her family in Oregon right away. The problem is they want a final death certificate in order to process the paperwork, and you have the cases pending. They demanded the death certificate be signed today for everything to go through." Now Willow was completely baffled. "Wait, they want me to finalize the cause and manner and will pay no matter what it says, even if I certify the case as a suicide?" "Yes. In fact, the attorney indicated the family understood that Mr. Green took his own life by jumping from the balcony. Is there a problem?" Now Dr. Banks sounded confused. "I was going to have some follow-up investigation done. The autopsy had some inconsistent findings that concerned me," Willow answered honestly. Dr. Banks sighed. "Dr. Rosenberg, I don't know exactly what is going on, but I'm getting unexpected pressure on this case. Not just from the company, but from others, and the wife called and confirmed that she wanted the death certificate ASAP, even if it was a suicide." The chief stood up and came out from behind his desk. "Willow, I like you. You are smart and energetic and have made an excellent start at being a top-notch forensic pathologist. I don't want to order you to do this, but if your autopsy showed injuries consistent with a multi-story jump, please certify the case and let this family get some closure and financial security. We all get cases with unexplainable minor discrepancies on occasion, and we have to learn to let those go." Willow had never found herself in this dilemma before. Dr. Banks was her boss. He had hired her, and she looked up to him. He had never pressured her regarding a case before in any way, and he had provided her with insightful counsel on difficult cases when she needed it. She needed a straight answer from him. "You think I should sign the death certificate?" The older man looked her in the eye. "I do." "Then I will do it today." Willow turned to leave the office as Dr. Banks went back to his chair. She was in the doorway when she thought about something he had told her. "Boss, you said the lawyer that called you was from PAI?" Dr. Banks nodded. "Our records indicate Duncan Green worked for Lab Services Incorporated. Was that an error?" "No, Lab Service got bought out by PAI last year, I think. They are a subsidiary now." The chief had already turned his attention to something on the desk. Willow nodded and left, heading back to her office with a troubled heart. She thought about telling Elise her concerns, but somehow didn't want to drag her friend into the mess. It was best to just get on her computer and do what she told her boss she would do, apply her electronic signature to the death certificate. As she keyed in the codes to finalize the cause and manner, she couldn't figure out why she was bothered that the lawyer had called from PAI. But then again, there were so many aspects to this whole case that disturbed her. The bottom line was, if Mrs. Green needed this for her family, would she really stand in the way over a few inconsistencies in the autopsy? No. She hit the enter key, and the death certificate for Duncan Green became just one of many she would complete that day. Tara waited until Monday evening to call Willow, unsure if she was even going to bring up the vampire. In the light of day it seemed almost surreal, as if she wasn't sure that she had really seen the brow ridges and fangs. "Hello?" Tara found herself smiling even at Willow's simple greeting. "Hi, sweetie. You busy?" "Tara, I'm so glad to hear your voice. I had a strange and crappy day, and you just made it exponentially better." Tara could hear the hint of a pout and imagined the cuteness of Willow's lower lip sticking out ever so slightly as she spoke. "I'm sorry to hear that. Want to tell me about it?" "Just weird and annoying stuff at work. I really like my profession and I'm lucky to have this job, but it can be hard too. One of my coworkers is a complete ass, and today my boss, who has never given me a hard time, was strangely insistent that I do something I was a little uncomfortable with regarding a case. Willow sighed deeply. But it's nothing I can't handle. Anyway, I'd much rather hear your voice and think about more pleasant things, like kissing you again. When do I get to do that? Wow, that voice was almost enough to have her headed for the door to catch the train to the city. I bet you get all the girls to fall at your feet when you talk to them like that, don't you? Tara laughed low as she spoke. I think it might be the other way around, 'cause you keep using that sexy voice with me, and I promise I'll be at your feet or anywhere else you want me. And that probably was too much information, so I'll just answer your question and say I've had limited girls or guys in my past, and none of them really did any falling, Willow added sadly. Tara was a little surprised about the guy's comment, but decided to let it go for now and change the subject. Well, their loss. Hey, can I ask you a Scooby-type question? Tara heard Willow shuffle like she was sitting up. Of course. Is something wrong? I'm not sure. Have you ever heard of vampire attacks in Berkeley? Tara was glad Willow couldn't see her chewing her lip as she asked. Tara, did you get attacked? Willow sounded panicked. No, but I think a vampire followed me home from the train station last night. I used your spell to make me less noticeable and got in the door, but he was there on my landing, with the brow ridges and fangs staring right at me. Tara shuddered at the memory. Oh, baby, why didn't you call me? Buffy and I could have come over and patrolled for him, found him, and given him a nice staking. Are you okay? If anything, Willow's level of panic had increased. I'm fine. He couldn't get in, and I have protection spells on my apartment. I was just surprised. I didn't know there were vampires here. Mrs. Darby didn't warn me when she rented me this apartment. Tara didn't want to upset Willow and tried to sound joking. I think there are vampires everywhere. They just usually seem to concentrate in big cities and near the Hellmouths. Are you sure you are okay? Buffy and I will come over tomorrow night and get rid of the nasty vamp. I can't have you in danger from some random undead creature. Willow sounded all business now. I'm really fine, Will. The redhead's concern warmed her like a blanket. I won't be here tomorrow night anyway. I'm going out of town with my boss and a coworker to do some scouting at the factory farms for a couple of days this week. We're going to talk to some of the workers in the pacification program. That sounds like it could be dangerous. Is that necessary? I've heard the companies keep a tight rein on the workers. A different concern drifted into Willow's voice now. It's what I do. My group is concerned about what is going on now, and the only people that can tell us what's really happening are the workers themselves. We've been hearing strange stories and need to check it out. I've done this sort of thing before. We know how to skirt the laws without breaking them. Tara needed to explain, but didn't want Willow to worry too much. Besides, I have a date Friday night with an incredibly sexy woman that I can't miss. The initial response over the phone was a whimper, followed by a breathless, Tara. They sat in silence for a few minutes, feeling their connection even while not physically being together. Finally, it was Willow that spoke. I'm so glad you called and let me know you would be gone. Buffy and Xander are going to talk to that snitch from Sacramento this week, and I'm going to make a call to a lawyer about helping your brother pro bono. Maybe I'll have good news for you on Friday. Tara felt tears come to her eyes. That is so nice of all of you. It's fine. The lawyer is sort of a Scooby connection, and I should probably see if he can even help first. If he can, then you and I can go meet him. Willow shifted back to a soft voice. Will you be able to call me while you are gone? Tara knew that the voice could break her heart. I wish I could say yes, but the answer is probably not. We have to be careful about using our phones. A deep sigh was the response this time. You know I'll be forced to worry about you. Don't worry, Willow. I'll be fine. Tara tried to inject some cheer into her voice. I hope your week improves, but not so much that Friday's a letdown. Oh, that could never happen. Be careful, please, Willow begged. I promise. Good night, Willow. Both women were trying to fill their hearts with each other to last the rest of the week. Good night, Tara. Chapter 7. Demon Drugs. James Pierce was annoyed. He had been forced to use a day of vacation time in order to meet with the chairman and founder of Farm Ag Industries on a Thursday, and had been told to report to the pharmaceutical manufacturing plant for the company located in an industrial area of Richmond, a long drive from his home. Usually he communicated with one of the chairman's assistants over the phone when they needed his assistance. He liked to think of the work he was doing for the PAI as consultation that required his high level of expertise. He had been approached about being placed on the payroll of PAI 6 months ago. When he indicated an interest, the chairman himself had taken him to dinner at one of the finest restaurants in the city, and had told him he was to play a vital role in the future of the company. In confidence, the chairman had revealed his plans to run for statewide office, possibly governor, placing him in a position to offer favors to those demonstrating loyalty. The chairman hadn't needed to remind him that the position of chief medical examiner was appointed by the governor's office. Once the contract was signed, a monthly retainer fee was deposited in his account, regardless of the hours of service provided. So far, the consultation services James had performed had been minimal. He had written 2 opinion letters about the safety of various drugs the company produced, and had been asked to intercede and conduct 2 autopsies at work. The first one, Jennifer Clausen, had not been a problem. He frowned as he thought about the second one, Duncan Green. He had been late that morning, and Willow Rosenberg had started the case before he got there, and wouldn't hand it over to him when he had asked. The redhead annoyed him in untold ways. She was young, smart, and pretty. She hadn't shown the slightest interest in him, and then made no secret of her unnatural sexual proclivities for women. The city was filled with ungodly degenerates like her, but it was reprehensible that she was allowed to hold such an important position. He would never view someone like her as an equal. In fact, when he became the chief, she would be in the first round of employees shown the door. Images of Willow weeping on her knees while begging him for a job entertained him until he arrived at the gate to the plant. He didn't understand why he needed to drive to this wasteland when PAI had a nice corporate office in the city, but the chairman had made his demand clear. After clearing security, he was ushered into a waiting area and offered a latte. At least they were minimally civilized here. Dr. Pierce? When James nodded, the young woman who had addressed him gestured for him to follow. They walked down a corridor and arrived at an elevator. I'm Amy Madison. I've been asked to provide you with a tour of our facility. The chairman will be meeting with you later for a discussion, I'm told. The elevator door opened, and she stepped in after him. I must remind you that everything you will see here today is strictly confidential, per the contract you signed. James was indignant. Amy was a nice-looking brunette in a trim suit, but he didn't need to waste his day with this overblown stewardess. I'm here for a tour? I told the chairman's assistant I'm very busy at work, and I've been ordered here for a tour of the pharmaceutical plant. Amy smiled thinly at his arrogance. She suspected in an hour he would be demonstrating a much different attitude. This tour will be rather unique. Only select individuals are allowed to access to what you will see today. She turned and opened a hidden panel in the elevator before pressing the button labeled B4 as she flashed her access card across the keypad. James looked at her with surprise. We're going down? Amy's smile broadened slightly. Oh yes, Dr. Pierce. Into the depths, you might say. Willow paid the cabbie and rushed into the lobby of the tall skyscraper that housed the offices of untold numbers of business and law firms. Her appointment was on the 22nd floor, about halfway up the building. As she waited for an elevator, she wondered again why Angel had said she needed to meet the attorney in person to see if he was appropriate and willing to help with Tara's brother. He didn't give her a specific name, but gave her the number of a law firm and told her to ask for the Governmental Assistance Department. She thought it was odd, but had called the number Angel provided, and a pleasant but sterile operator had taken her message and called her back a few minutes later, and asked if she could come to the meeting with the attorney today, Thursday. She had come over during her lunch hour and was hoping she wouldn't be too late getting back. When she arrived on the 22nd floor, she found the designated office number and entered to find a young man in a military uniform seated at a desk in front of an inner door with an access card lock. "I'm here to meet with an attorney from the Governmental Assistance Department," Willow asked, wondering what Angel had gotten her into. If this is the right place, she laughed to herself, it is over-the-top cloak and dagger. The young Marine looked down at a paper on his desk. "Dr. Rosenberg?" When she nodded, he added, "May I see some identification?" Just then the inner door opened, and a tall, well-built man in his 30s emerged. "That won't be necessary, Sergeant. Dr. Rosenberg and I go way back." Willow couldn't hide the shock on her face. "Riley?" "Hi, Willow. Come on in. I hear you need some help." Riley ushered her into a comfortable but clearly government office and offered her a seat, a grin never leaving his face. "Surprised to see me?" "You could say that. I guess we thought you were still trapezing around the jungle, killing things." Now that the shock of seeing Riley Finn was wearing off, Willow's mind came up with a million questions. "You're an attorney? In San Francisco? For how long? You work for the government?" Riley laughed. "You haven't changed, have you, Willow?" Riley proceeded to tell her an abbreviated version of how he had ended up in San Francisco. He had been injured in a demon battle, and the government offered to put him through law school. He worked on legal issues regarding demon special ops projects. Everything from international transport of captured demons to bailing out Special Forces team members who got into bar brawls. He had been assigned to the West Coast 6 months earlier and had contacted Angel to discuss a certain evil law firm that was opening a branch in San Francisco. "Wow." Willow didn't know what to say. "Well, I don't know if you can help my friend with her brother's case or not. It's not demon-related, but he has been set up by someone. He's looking at a really long prison sentence or pacification if he gets convicted. Buffy and Xander are talking to someone today who may have more information." Willow couldn't help but see the flinch in Riley's shoulders when she mentioned Buffy. It probably wasn't fair, but she needed to ask. "How's Sam?" "She's fine, living outside of Washington, D.C. with a husband and 2 kids. We got divorced 5 years ago." Riley stared out the window at the fog-covered city. Now it was Willow cringing. "I'm sorry, that was rude of me to ask when you were being nice. Do you think you can help Tara's brother?" "I honestly don't know, but I will look into it. I have to be in Sacramento next week for a meeting with some legislators." Riley stepped back to his desk and looked at some notes. "I'll stop by the jail and meet this Donald McClay Jr., see what is going on." "Thank you so much. I can bring Tara by to meet you too, if you'd like." Willow smiled, and her eyes got a little unfocused. She could fill you in on the details. Riley laughed again. "I'm glad to see you're happy, Willow. How's everyone else?" "Xander's fine. Thanks for asking," Willow answered with a smirk. "Buffy's fine, Riley. Still single. It's all right if I tell her we met, right? That you might be able to help?" "Sure, Will. It's all business." "Right. All business." James thought he was going to be sick. The half-demon, half-human creature moaning in the cage in front of him was worse than any autopsy case he had ever seen. Maybe because the thing was a grotesque mixture of skin and scales that shouldn't exist. It was clearly dying, and he wished it would do so quickly, to put both of them out of their misery. "So, Dr. Pierce, that concludes our tour of the lower levels. The chairman would like to see you now, so I will escort you to his office on the 10th floor." How could this woman be so chipper while he was turning various shades of green? He had noticed earlier that the white coat Amy had donned when they entered the first lab had identified her as the director of laboratory affairs, whatever that title meant. She had taken him through the processing section, where the pacification serum was produced first, a boring half-hour looking at test tubes, whirling inside machinery. The next level held a hospital-type wing where several human volunteers were undergoing a variety of physical examinations and blood draws. Most of the subjects appeared to be post-pacification and voiced no complaint at the poking and prodding they were being subjected to. James could never have prepared himself for the final level. As they rode the elevator, Miss Madison's voice had remained light and airy, as if she was describing her favorite dinner selections. Instead, she was previewing what he was about to see, the true source of the pacification serum. His mind tried to absorb the concept that demons were real. That should have been easy when several were huddled directly in front of him, behind thick glass. They were large, lumpy, and covered in gray scales, moving slowly in a shuffling gait. He was reminded, if anything, of the way oxen moved, except on 2 feet. But one look into the eyes of these creatures showed a disturbingly conscious awareness. When Miss Madison had suggested they move along, James had been more than ready, thinking they were headed back upstairs. Then she had exposed him to that final horror. Her explanation of why the hybridization was required drifted through his mind without awareness as his nausea rose uncontrollably. Now he was riding the elevator up to a meeting with the chairman, and the sudden jolt of the car upward did nothing to keep his stomach from rolling. At least he made it out of the elevator into a trash can in the hallway before he lost his breakfast. He wiped the sweat from his brow and used a handkerchief on his mouth as Miss Madison waited impatiently nearby, tapping her foot. He needed to pull himself together. He was an experienced forensic pathologist who had seen things ordinary people couldn't imagine. Mutant-demon hybrids shouldn't bother him. He took a deep breath and willed his stomach to calm. "I'm ready, Amy." "Good, Dr. Pierce. The chairman is waiting." "He's not going to show, Buff," Xander said for the 3rd time. "Let's give him 10 more minutes. You know these guys don't care about being on time." Buffy thought Xander was probably right, but they had driven for 90 minutes to be here, and she wasn't anxious to head back empty-handed. "Fine. Got any more of those chips? Sitting here doing nothing is making me hungry." Xander poked the Slayer in the side. Buffy tossed the bag in his lap before frowning out the passenger window of the nondescript sedan they were driving. They were sitting in an alley behind a group of bars in a run-down part of Sacramento. Her contact had promised his snitch had information and would be cooperative for the right incentive. He had apparently pissed off some local vampires and was thrilled to hear that someone might not just believe him, but actually be able to help him, so not showing up was probably a bad sign. Really bad. 30 minutes later, Buffy called her contact and verified he had not heard from the snitch either. "Let's go, Zan. It's a bust." "Thank you for riding with Harris Limousine Service. We are happy to provide hours of meaningless travel to unattractive destinations in uncomfortable vehicles." Xander grumbled as he started the car and headed back toward the freeway to San Francisco. Buffy reached over and smacked him on the arm. This was for Tara, which means it was for Willow, too. "Ow, I know. Willow's going to be disappointed. Maybe she had better luck with the mystery lawyer." Xander tried to rub his arm while driving. "I hope so. Will is happier about this woman than I've seen her in a long time, and I know she really wants to find a way to help Tara with her brother." Buffy made herself as comfortable as possible against the window and drifted off as Xander drove. "Dr. Pierce, I see that Miss Madison has given you the full tour." The chairman of PAI was blatantly mocking his obvious discomfort. In the doorway, Amy was smirking until the chairman dismissed her with a wave. The chairman stepped over to a small bar and sat into the wall of the expensive office and filled 2 glasses with ice water. Gesturing for both of them to sit, he handed off one of the glasses before speaking. "I brought you here today for one reason. You are a relatively new but important member of our PAI family. I've assured you are being paid generously for a very little work. I have asked you to intercede in 2 medical examiner cases, and in the most recent one, Duncan Green, you completely failed me." James felt he had to step in and defend himself. "I know I didn't get to the case in time, but that Rosenberg bitch grabbed the file and wouldn't give it to me. But I did stop the follow-up investigation." "Your actions contributed nothing," the chairman stated bluntly. "I provided the family with significant financial compensation in order to secure their cooperation in making that case go away, and I had to call in other favors to apply some pressure where needed. It would not be an understatement to say I am not pleased with your work product at this time." James took a drink of his water. "I'm sorry, it won't happen again." "I'm glad to hear that. I wanted you to take the tour today so that you understand you are fully invested in the most sensitive information about our organization. Very few individuals have access to what you were privileged to see." The chairman stood and approached the ceiling-to-floor windows that dominated one wall of the office and indicated James should come over as well. "With privilege comes responsibility, Dr. Pierce. When you are asked to perform more services under your contract, I expect nothing but complete compliance." James thought about the volunteers in the underground. He understood completely. "Yes, sir." "Good. Rest assured, good work will be rewarded as well." The chairman clapped a seemingly friendly hand on James' shoulder. "I'll call Miss Madison to escort you out." As James headed for the office door, the chairman spoke once more. "And James, Duncan Green and Jennifer Clausen were once similarly privileged members of our PAI family as well. Understand?" "Yes, sir." James gulped. He wasn't sure he would make it back to his car without another trip to the trash can. Suddenly the retainer fee he had agreed to didn't seem nearly high enough. For now he would just have to go along with their requirements until he could find a way to extricate himself from the contract. It was several hours later, and just after dusk, when the chairman left his office at the plant and headed for the limo waiting for him in the parking lot. He slid into the back seat and was surprised to find another occupant waiting for him. "You scared me," the chairman exclaimed. "I have that effect on people." The speaker was sitting in the darkest shower of the vehicle and made no effort to reveal himself further. "What are you doing here?" The chairman wasn't used to having to hide his annoyance with people. "You would do well to watch your tone with me. Don't forget we both serve the same master. You are just providing a more agreeable public face, you might say." The speaker's voice had a hissing quality that made the chairman queasy. "My apologies. How may I be of service today?" The chairman had no desire to get this man on his bad side. He had seen the unpleasant results of those who had. "My master requires the timetable be expedited. Announce the next phase of the pacification program and get enough serum ready." The dark speaker made the statement an unequivocal directive. The chairman was definitely not going to be ordered around like a flunky. "I can't do that. We aren't ready. We might be able to speed up the serum production, but the land acquisition piece isn't even complete. We should stick to the agreed-upon plan." This time the dark speaker leaned forward in his seat and raised one gloved hand, slowly twisting it in the air. "Our master decides when you are ready. He has waited many years for this, and his patience has run out." The chairman found himself clutching his chest, suddenly feeling as if his heart was clenched in a vice. A few excruciatingly moments later, the pain relented, and he slumped back into his seat, sweat pouring from his face. "Do we have an understanding?" The dark speaker had relaxed back into the shadow. "Yes, of course," the chairman gasped. "Good. And don't worry about the land acquisition. I have taken that matter into my own hands, and it will be resolved shortly." The speaker seemed to fold back even more into the darkness. "I'll be using this vehicle tonight. I need to make a short trip out of town. You are dismissed, Mr. Flint." And that concludes the ending of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the next couple chapters of Cosin Manor. Again, if you are enjoying the story, I recommend getting hold of the author and letting her know. And if you like listening to the podcast, feedback can be emailed to me at underyourspellpodcast@yahoo.com. You can also go on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating and review, or take the listener survey, which all links to all this stuff is in the show notes. Thank you again for joining me this week, and we'll talk soon.